and welcome to my lesson on photosynthesis. I hope you enjoy it. I am using this new digital pen, so my writing, I'm going to take it slow so that you can actually read what I'm writing. And let's hope it works. Okay, so the first question we ask ourselves in photosynthesis is, what's the point? Why do we do it? Okay, well, the whole point of photosynthesis is that we want to take energy and we want to turn it into a usable form that we can use in our bodies, because our bodies need energy to power all the chemical reactions that take part. So energy comes in lots of different forms. It comes as mechanical, movement, that kind of thing. Sound, so sound waves, they contain energy. Chemical energy, that's the energy stored between the bonds in molecules. Electrical energy, so lightning, that sort of thing. Light or radiant energy, and this is the entire electromagnetic spectrum. So we're talking about visible light, we're talking about infrared light, we're talking about microwaves, X-rays, all those contain energy. We're also talking about heat energy. And then finally, nuclear energy. So that's the energy stored within the nucleus of atoms. And when atoms' nuclei split, they give out an enormous amount of energy. So our question is, we need energy to power our bodies, and the most abundant form of energy is the sun. However, we cannot take that energy and convert it into the energy that we need, which is sugar. So how does this happen? How do we get sunlight, which is around us all the time, into an energy form that we need? Well, this is where our little friends, plants, come in. And they take the sunlight and they are able to convert it into sugar. Okay, and then we eat the plants and we get the energy from the sun via the sugar molecule. Now, sugar is a chemical, so therefore the energy that we get from sugar is chemical energy. Okay, and the energy is stored within the bonds. Now, we don't use the sugar as is. Okay, the sugar is just a mechanism of getting the energy into our bodies. When we talk about cellular respiration, we're going to talk about how we take that sugar and break it down into more usable forms. Okay, but the main point for this is that we need plants that are able to convert this sunlight, this radiant energy, and they turn it into chemical energy, which is then something we can use. And we can eat plants that have made this sugar, or we can eat other animals that have eaten plants that have made this sugar. So that's why plants do photosynthesis and why it's so important. Okay, so now we know why we do photosynthesis. The next question is, how does it happen? Okay, what's going on? So as we know, we have the sun and it has all these radiant energy waves coming down to Earth. However, we can't harness that energy. A leaf can, however, because inside a leaf are these little organelles, okay, within its cell. So there's its cell, and there's its nucleus, and we have these little organelles, okay? And if we look closer inside these organelles, they are filled with these stacks, okay? These organelles, if you remember, are called chloroplasts. And inside chloroplasts is a pigment called chlorophyll. And this chlorophyll is what harnesses or is able to capture the energy from the sunlight. Okay, so what are the ingredients? What do we need during photosynthesis? Well, we need water, so H2O. So that comes into the leaf through the roots, and we also need carbon dioxide. And the carbon dioxide comes into the leaf through the air. And then what happens is within the leaf, a reaction takes place in the chloroplast, and what is given out is a waste product of oxygen. Okay, so oxygen comes out, and the other product, the one that we want, is sugar. Okay, or if we want to be more specific, glucose. Or if you want to be really specific, C6H12O6. Okay, so we get carbon dioxide and water, energy from the sun, all happens in the chloroplasts because they contain the chlorophyll. We get oxygen given out and then sugar. What type of sugar? Glucose. And there's its formula. Okay, so that's the basics of what's going on in there. So now I want us to take a quick look at the equation for photosynthesis. So we start off with carbon dioxide. So we have carbon dioxide and we react it with water and it turns into sugar and oxygen. Okay, now if we're being precise, we'd actually say it's glucose. The sugar it turns into is actually glucose. Now the better way, oh, and of course, don't forget, we need sunlight, because without sunlight, it's not going to happen. Okay, and not just sunlight, okay, so we can't do this on our own. What else do we need? Well, we also need chlorophyll. Chlorophyll. Not very good with this pen. Okay, so that's our word equation, but we need to be able to say it in molecules. So CO2, carbon dioxide, plus water, H2O, gives us glucose, which is C6H12O6, and oxygen, O2. Now, I know you're looking at this glucose and just crying, thinking, I will never ever be able to remember that. Trust me, the more we talk about it, the more you'll just keep saying it. C6H12O6, C6H12O6. Now, don't forget, we also have sunlight. Ooh, let me just rub that out because my writing is getting worse. So let's try that again. So we have sunlight, and we also have our chlorophyll. Now, what you might notice is, think of this as Lego bricks, right? Carbon dioxide is 1 carbon Lego brick and 2 oxygen Lego bricks. We start off with 1 carbon, and yet we make a molecule that has 6 carbons in it. So it's like starting off with 1 carbon Lego brick, and all of a sudden what we've made has 6 in it. Okay, that can't happen. So what we need to do is what's called balancing the equation. And so to balance this equation, it turns out if we have 6 carbon dioxides and 6 waters, we can make glucose, and we make 6 oxygens. And if you count them, it makes up 6 carbons, 6 carbons. 6 twos are 12, plus another 6 is 18 oxygens. 6 there, which is 6, plus 6 twos are 12, 18 oxygens. And then let's see the hydrogens. 6 twos are 12, 12 hydrogens. So it balanced, okay? A balanced equation. So that's the equation for photosynthesis. You need to know that, okay? So make sure that you remember it. If we were to look at the cross section, that means if we were to get a leaf, cut it down, and then look through the side of it, this is what it looks like. Okay, it's got lots of different layers of cells. So the first top part is called the waxy, oh, I might get my pen right, waxy cuticle. And what happens here is, if you've ever felt a leaf, the top of it feels sort of not greasy but waxy, and that's because the leaf gets exposed to the rain a lot, and we don't want rain getting in there and making it soggy. So it has this layer, okay, of lipids, of wax, which just stops the water from making the cells become soggy. So we have a waxy cuticle. Underneath that is our top layer, which is called the upper epidermis. And it's just a thin layer of cells, okay? It's totally spelled that wrong. Let's go back. Upper, oh, see how that works? Brilliant. Epidermis. Epidermis. Okay, so you have the upper epidermis, and this is this layer, just at the very top of thin cells. as you notice, right, they're not green, and that's because they don't really have that much chloroplasts in them. The next layer is this layer here, okay, and this layer is called the palisade cells. And in the palisade cells, this is where all the action's happening. This is where photosynthesis occurs. Okay, so this is where the main thing's happening. Photosynthesis. Okay, so as you can see, these cells have got lots and lots of green in them because they're filled, jammed, packed with chloroplasts. Now here, running through a leaf, okay, if you've ever pulled a leaf apart, you notice it's got like veins in it. And that is in fact a vein. And similar to our veins, okay, we have to transport things into and out of the cell. We have to transport the water. So think about it, water's in the ground and it has to get to the top of the plant, to the leaves. So it travels up through these things called veins, and it gets into a leaf through the vein. Okay. At the same time, the sugar that's made in the leaf has to be transported around the cell to power all the different things happening in the plant. So this is like a two-way system. Okay, there's different tubes that take things into the leaf and take things out of the leaf. Okay, so it's called a vein. Okay, the next layer underneath, okay, here is called, well, if this was the upper epidermis, this would be the lower epidermis. Now you'll notice, right, there's not really a there's not really a waxy layer at the bottom, and that's because the water doesn't normally come from underneath the leaf, does it? It gets wet from the top. So this is just a lower one single layer of cells. Now over here, so we've talked about how the water gets in, but how does the carbon dioxide get into the leaf? Because remember, the carbon dioxide is in the air. Well, the carbon dioxide comes in through here. This thing here is called the stoma. Okay, stoma. And it's like a little hole, a little pore that allows carbon dioxide in and oxygen out. So let's have a look. We have CO2 in and we have O2 out. However, what you'll notice is the stoma has these two cells here which are called guard cells, and they basically open and close. Okay, regulating how much carbon dioxide is allowed in and how much of the oxygen let out. So these two here are called the guard cells. And then finally, underneath this palisade layer, we have a layer called the spongy mesophyll. If you look at this, what you'll notice is it's spongy because it's got all these air gaps in it, see? So it's sort of squishy and spongy. Okay, so this is the cross section of a leaf, and this is where all the action's happening. But this, okay, the palisade cells is where the photosynthesis takes place. Now I want us to take a look at the chloroplasts. Okay, so remember, inside the plant cells there are these green organelles, as you can see on all these different diagrams, called chloroplasts, and this is where photosynthesis happens because they contain chlorophyll, which is able to capture the sunlight. Now, if we were to look at an actual cross-section of a chloroplast, okay, so this is an electron micrograph which has been magnified many times. Okay, you will see it looks like there's stacks. Okay, some people think that they look like stacks of pancakes. I like to think of them as stacks of solar panels because they're to do with the sun, so it just makes a bit more sense to me. Here is a diagrammatic representation, okay, so a diagram of this electron micrograph. So here are the stacks here, and then the stacks are floating in this liquid. Okay, so let's look at what things are. So these little pancakes, or these little solar panels if you like, okay, these are called thylakoids. Okay, thylakoids. And these thylakoids are where the first part of photosynthesis happens. They're green, and this is where the chlorophyll is, and this is where the sunlight is captured. Now, a stack of thylakoids, okay, so here's a stack of them, like a stack of pancakes. That's called a granum. Okay, so a stack of thylakoids, one is just the one on the top, a stack of them is called a granum. Now this liquid that they are floating in, okay, so this part here and this part here, this is where it gets a little bit confusing, the stroma with an R. So remember before on the leaf we looked at the stoma, which was the entrance in and out, where the gases get in and out. Well, in a chloroplast, the liquid in which they float around in is called the stroma, okay, with an R. So that's a little bit different, okay? And again, this is a chloroplast, just in case you forgot what it was. Chloroplast. Okay, so that's the insides of the chloroplast. Now we're going to take a look a little bit deeper, and let's see what we can see. Here's another diagram of the chloroplast. As you can see, here are the different thylakoids, okay, in their stack. And remember, the stack is called a granum. And then this liquid that they are floating in is called the stroma. So let's just label it one last time. Oh, let me get my pen working. Okay, so each individual one is called a thylakoid. Thylakoid. Okay, the liquid, okay, is called the stroma. And then a whole stack of them, okay, oh, not sure if that's going to show you, but a stack of thylakoids. Oh, have I got enough room? Is called a granum. Okay, and this is where it's all happening. So we said that carbon dioxide plus water with a little bit of light energy turns into sugar and oxygen. Now, of course, this is biology. It's not just as simple as putting some carbon dioxide together and, hey presto, we get sugar and oxygen. No, there are a series of complicated enzyme-driven reactions that are far too complex for us to talk about now. But what happens overall is that carbon dioxide and water give us sugar and oxygen. But we can break down these complicated reactions into two types of reaction. And the first one is called photolysis. Okay? Photolysis. And photo means light. Okay? So photo part of it means light. Lysis means to break apart. So we're breaking something apart, okay, using light. And all this happens in the thylakoid. Okay, so photolysis happens in the thylakoid. So that's important to remember. Thylakoid. Okay, so the question is, what we're breaking apart? Okay, what is the light breaking apart? This is where the energy comes from, okay, to drive all this, the sun. Okay, so what we break apart is water. Okay, water is broken apart using photolysis. So let's think back to our class. We used to describe water as looking like Mickey Mouse. So here he is. Okay, he's not great drawing, but hey, that's me. So we have oxygen, and then we have two hydrogens. Okay, so here's our water molecule. During photolysis, okay, so I want you to really think about this image in your head. During the photolysis, the molecule that's broken apart is water. And basically, Mickey Mouse's ears are ripped off. Okay, we rip off these hydrogens. Okay, we break apart the water. So photolysis is basically the ripping, don't write this in an exam, off of Mickey Mouse's ears. Okay, photolysis. Oh, how sad. Okay, we rip off these hydrogens. So what we get is we have water, and we turn water into oxygen. Okay, so we do, two of them makes an oxygen molecule. Okay, and we know that the oxygen leaves the cell, Okay, it's a byproduct, it's not needed, it's one of our products. But we also free up the hydrogen. And the hydrogen is the important part because we're going to use that hydrogen to combine with the carbon dioxide to make the sugar. Okay, so this part of the reaction is called the light-dependent reaction because it depends on the light. You can't break things apart using light if you don't have light. So it's called the light-dependent reaction. If there's no light, we're not doing photolysis. And if we're not doing photolysis, then we're not generating the hydrogen that we need to combine to make the sugar. Okay, so this is the first step in photosynthesis. And it all happens in the thylakoid. Okay, so just make sure you remember that. It happens in the thylakoid. Now the second part, and the final part, should I say, of photosynthesis reactions, okay, is what do we do with the carbon dioxide? What's going on with that? Well, we said already that the water generated hydrogen, okay, and it also gave off oxygen, okay. We need to now combine that hydrogen with the carbon dioxide, okay, to make sugar. Okay, now this is called the Calvin cycle. Okay, it's a series of really complicated reactions that we don't need to know anything about, to be honest, but this makes is the second part, okay, where we're using the carbon dioxide here with the hydrogen to make sugar. And it's light independent, which means we don't need light for this part. It doesn't mean it can't happen when this light is out. It just means we don't need it. It's independent of light because we've already used the light to break up the water. So now we're just taking the product of that breakup and combining it with our carbon dioxide to make sugar. And all this happens in the stroma. Okay? It happens in the liquid part of the chloroplast. So photolysis happened in the thylakoids. Calvin's cycle happens in the stroma. Okay? And basically that's it. That's the two sets of reactions that make carbon dioxide and water with the energy from the light turn into sugar and oxygen. Okay, pretty simple. Not really. Talked about two pretty difficult concepts. Photolysis and the Calvin cycle, the light dependent and the light independent reaction, which overall gives us photosynthesis. So let's start over here, okay? So this is the light dependent, my pen, dent reaction, okay? And this happens in the thylakoid. Okay, and this is where we get water, and water comes in and it gets broken up into oxygen that comes out, and we get hydrogen given off. Okay, and we say this is light dependent, and it's also known as photolysis. Photolysis, the breaking apart of water using light. The second part of our photosynthesis is the light independent. Okay, so it means it doesn't need light, it can happen without light. Doesn't mean it can't happen with light there, it just means it doesn't need it. Dependent. Okay. And this happens in the stroma. Okay. And this is where we get hydrogen in, and we also get the carbon dioxide coming in. And what happens is we do the Calvin cycle. Calvin, remember, which is a series of complex enzyme-driven reactions. And what we give out is sugar. Now, the first sugar that's made is glucose. But glucose is quickly joined together to other glucoses, to other glucoses, to other glucoses to make starch. Okay? So, light dependent, light independent. This must happen first in order to do this light dependent, because without that hydrogen, we can't make the sugar. Okay? So that's just a little summary of that. Okay, so in summary, we have sunlight. Oh, why is my pen not working? Sunlight, which provides the energy for all these reactions that take place, and carbon dioxide, CO2, and water, H2O, and within the chloroplasts, okay, so I'm just gonna chloroplasts, we get oxygen given out of the leaf, and we get sugar that is made, which is a fuel for all the reactions that happen within the cell and within the plant to happen. So we get carbon dioxide plus water with the energy from the light gives us sugar and oxygen. And that, my friends, is photosynthesis. Ooh. Hope you enjoyed it.